Hi everyone, today we're back on the topic of relationships. Now I've spoken about relationships in some shape or form in some of my previous videos, but today I want to speak about two main things. One is codependency and one is rescuing. Now, are you a rescuer in relationships? This is usually someone who wears a hero's cape, who's always there, who saves the day, who battles all the drama. So it's really the person who's constantly rescuing other people, either emotionally or physically, from what they perceive to be harm. Now, the basis of any good and healthy relationship is give and take, but the rescuer is always giving more than they're receiving. So there is an imbalance which can lead to them feeling depleted and drained and lacking energy because their focus is always on other people and there's no time or energy or focus left for themselves. So if it's so draining, why does a rescuer continue to do this? Well, usually it's because they have a need to feel needed. So they get some sense of self-esteem and self-worth and self-purpose from rescuing victim after victim. And actually, it can feel good to feel needed. And it usually isn't from a malicious place. It's just that the rescuer may not be aware of their motivations. But essentially, this doesn't help the other person to almost act like an adult because they're put in the victim position. And this then leads me on to my next topic of codependency. So the rescuer often plays their role again and again in relationships. So that's their pattern of relating to people. And often there are people who like to be on the receiving end of rescuing. So they're always a victim, if you like. And I'm not saying this in a critical way, but often by rescuing, we can think that we're doing something really positive and we're helping another person. But sometimes we can be keeping them in a position of disempowerment and a position of neediness. So they actually don't really realise their full potential either. And so rescuing and codependency can often go hand in hand. Now, codependency can often be described as an excessive physical or emotional reliance on a partner or a significant other in a relationship. So even though the rescuer may be doing their best to support that person, and it's probably coming from a good place, it actually doesn't empower them. And it actually doesn't do much good for them in the long term because they never learn how to really step into their own position of power. Now, patterns can feel somewhat ingrained and actually they just become our usual way of relating to people. But once we can notice our tendencies in relationships, then we can look at actually, is this the healthiest option? Not just for me, but for the other person, or do I need to do things differently? Remember, you can always speak to someone in more detail if you wanted to really explore your patterns in relationships and how you could make changes. But usually in relationships, two people are quite comfortable with how things have played out. So if you are going to make changes, you need to be quite consistent, and it takes time because it's not easy to change and people often resist change because it feels scary or it feels new. But the more consistent you are with your changes, the easier and quicker it will become to change any unhealthy patterns in your relationships.